Masters of the Universe 2026. Is it woke slop or is it He-Man done right? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So make yourself a drink, a snack, light a cigar. This may be a long video. First things first, I'm not being paid or sponsored to say these things. I have 22 subscribers. Nobody's going to sponsor a 22 subscriber channel. Second of all, I was a huge He-Man fan back in the early 80s during the original cartoon and toy line run. I was 4 in 1983 when the cartoon came out. It was pretty much the first cartoon and toy series that I really genuinely got attached to. I had most of the toys. I've seen most, if not all, of the original cartoon episodes. I also watched the original She-Ra because to me it was basically just another, continuation of He-Man. I didn't enjoy it quite as much. I still watched it. I went to the theaters to see the 1987 Masters of the Universe movie, and I absolutely hated it. To me, that wasn't He-Man at all, and that basically killed He-Man for me. I never watched any of the follow-on remakes, reboots, etc., including the Kevin Smith ones. So I'm definitely not what you would call a hardcore He-Man fan. I just really loved it as a kid. So with that having been said, let's go ahead and just get right into it. This is probably going to be more of a discussion video rather than a true review. So let me get started. Actually, one more thing. This is going to be very heavy spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie yet and you want to, as a courtesy, maybe don't watch this yet. But to be honest, there's really not a lot to spoil in this movie. If you've seen all the trailers, then you basically know what happens anyway. And the rest is kind of predictable. So first thing you need to know about this movie is that it is not a faithful adaptation of the 1980s cartoon. It's just another Hollywood remake infected with woke ideology, identity politics, emasculated male characters, girl bosses, and just an utter contempt for the original He-Man's heroic masculinity. Despite what you may have been told by bigger, more well-known YouTube channels, this movie is the very definition of woke. The writers have just done it in a clever way that gets the message past these people that would normally call it out. And a lot of that is due to them actually simultaneously promoting the message while also poking a little bit of fun at it. Let's take a minute to talk about what woke actually is, because it feels like every single person on the internet has their own different personal definition of what woke really means. So much so that it feels like the term woke is almost becoming a meaningless term now. When we talk about woke, what we're talking about is cultural leftism in the Western world with identity politics at its very core. We're talking about critical race theory, feminist and queer theory, and other postmodern ideas that treat truth, science, and merit as socially constructed tools of power. Now, depending on who you ask, this can also be called cultural Marxism, social justice, anti-oppression work, that kind of thing. But it's all the same. It prioritizes equity of outcomes by identity group, and it's about taking over institutions through DEI, speech norms, cancel culture, and it reframes things like law, science, sports, education through a power and oppression point of view. It differs from, say, like traditional communism or Marxism in that it's not about your social class, it's all about your identity. Cultural hegemony is a big part of this, and that's the idea that power is maintained through dominant cultural narratives. So revolutionaries must conquer institutions like academia, media, and the arts. It covers a broad range of ideas, from moderate corporate DEI language to more radical positions like defunding the police, biological sex denialism in policy, and decolonization of, say, like school subjects, the media, arts, etc. And if you look at Masters of the Universe 2026 from this point of view, this movie is 100% absolutely woke. Now let's break down what makes it woke, starting with some of the most obvious points. The first very obvious point to anybody that's seen the original He-Man are the race swaps. The most obvious example being Idris Elba as Man-at-Arms / Duncan, who was originally a white character in the He-Man cartoon. Originally, Man-at-Arms was the adoptive father of Teela, and he was there to provide a loving, protective, and sometimes strict father figure for her. He tried to teach her important life lessons and not only protect her from enemies, but protect her from her own bad decisions. Now, we know that woke Hollywood writers absolutely despise proper father figures, and they've really taken a dump on the Man-at-Arms character in this film. He literally spends 15 years as a drunk, pissing and puking on himself and getting himself thrown in prison, I'm guessing, for being drunk in public or something. It's almost like a cell phone for woke Hollywood. Back in the 80s when he was a white father, he was loving, caring, protective, taught moral lessons. Now that they've race swapped him to a black guy for the film, he's a drunk loser who doesn't take proper care of his daughter. So, yeah. Speaking of Tila, she's also been race swapped. And what's funny about the Tila character is she actually swaps races in the film. In the beginning of the movie, when we're seeing young Tila, she's played by a mixed race Irish and Burmese actress. When she grows up to the adult Tila, she's played by a mixed race white Latina actress. In the original cartoon, she's white with red hair, so here we have yet another example of Hollywood replacing a red-haired character. Now, I'll admit this isn't quite as bad as if they cast her with like a black actress, for example, similar to what they've done with Black Snape in the new upcoming HBO Harry Potter series. But we should really have zero tolerance for any kind of race swaps of existing characters, especially if the far left themselves are going to complain when they don't match a character's ethnicity with an actor of the same ethnicity. Along the same lines, the Sorceress has also been race swapped. She's also a mixed race white Latina actress. Ram Man has been swapped from a white character to an Asian character. Triclops has been swapped from a white guy to a black guy. As an interesting side note to the race swap characters, the movie did not choose to include any of the very specifically non-white characters in the film. Notably, Clamp Champ, who was probably the only actually black toy during the original toy run, even though he was a late addition, I think. There was an Asian character called Jitsu. Let me just empathize with the far left for a minute. I can see why they might not have wanted to use Jitsu, because you could probably fairly assume that it might have been a bit of a not so nice representation of Asians, but they could have easily have modified that character to be less of a potentially offensive stereotype, but they didn't do that. They just didn't bother to include him at all. There's another character from the original toy line called Buzz Off. He's got brown skin, but he's like a bee person, for lack of a better term. They could have used him in the movie, but they didn't. They chose to race swap existing white characters, and I think that really tells you everything you need to know about the race swapping decisions they made in this movie. And people keep trying to convince you that this movie is not woke. At least one of the characters in the movie has been gender swapped, that being Roboto. Surprisingly, that's the robot. You'd never guess by the name. Now, some people say, oh, it's a robot. Robots don't have a gender. Well, Mattel actually gendered the robot. On the packaging of the toy, it says right there, twist his waist. And of course, it's molded in a very similar, if not the same, body shape as the rest of like the male figures like He-Man, Skeletor, etc. So it has that male body and is gendered by the toy line itself. So you can't use that argument that robots don't have a gender when the toy line itself gendered the robot. We'll talk more about Roboto later. Now, some reviewers on YouTube will try and claim that the Masters of the Universe movie celebrates masculinity. Well, that's complete and utter bullshit. Now, I can't tell you for sure if they're straight up lying about it, or if they just missed the message that was given to them, or if they're just smoking huge amounts of copium. The truth is that He-Man in this movie is an absolute pussy the entire movie. He's completely emasculated and never regains any kind of true masculinity throughout the entire movie. When we first see Adam in the beginning of the movie, he's supposed to be like 10 years old. He's a runt. He's weak. He's absolutely hopeless at fighting. He gets his ass kicked by girls all the time. He gets shoved into lockers by girls. Like, he's completely hopeless. There's one female character. I think her name is Dion. I might be saying that wrong. I don't really care, to be honest. She kind of takes on the role of the traditional 1980s style male bully, picking on a kid that's smaller and weaker than she is. This is something that I never personally saw as a kid in the 1980s. I started school in a very unique American school on a military base in England. We had kindergarten all the way up through 8th grade in the same school. We would literally, as kindergartners, be around eighth graders all the time. The older girls, like seventh and eighth grade girls, they were lovely to us. Like, I have pictures in family albums back at my parents' house of me being hugged and cuddled by one of the older girls in school. Like, she absolutely loved me. She would never have even thought about bullying the younger boys. But this is 2026 Hollywood. Every girl has to be a complete and utter bitch who absolutely despises anything male. Later on, when we see Adam grown up, he's working in an office and he's still the same emasculated pussy of a man that he was as a kid. Despite him now being absolutely buff and ripped and physically capable of dealing with people who might try and bully him. In the original cartoon, Prince Adam was not a coward. He was not weak. He put on an act to try and keep his secret identity secret. If something dangerous was about to happen, he would put on an act. He would make an excuse. He would run off. But it wasn't because he was scared. It's because he needed to go off somewhere where nobody would see him transform into He-Man. The reality was, Adam was responsible, brave, intelligent, and heroic. He just could not show that as Adam because it would potentially give away his secret identity as He-Man. This naturally led to him being made fun of by Tila and his dad being disappointed in him. But it wasn't real. That wasn't the reality of his character. And in the movie, he is weak. He is a coward. He's a pussy. Prince Adam, in the original, he's basically Clark Kent. Clark Kent always had to be a mild-mannered dude to keep his identity a Superman secret. It's the same thing with Adam. If Skeletor ever found out that Adam was He-Man, his family and friends would always be in danger. This is where a lot of the comedy and drama from the original cartoon show came from. You had him pretending he has to be a coward and a weakling, and then running off, transforming into He-Man, and then you get the whole power fantasy of this so-called weak dude becoming the most powerful man in the universe. They parallel this with the whole Cringer and Battle Cat dynamic. Cringer is an actual coward, but the second he turns into Battle Cat, he's now brave and a worthy hero on his own, just like He-Man. This was all part of the whole power fantasy of the original cartoon. Any kid watching, you could imagine yourself as Adam, just an ordinary, underestimated kid. All of a sudden, saying a few words and raising a sword, you can become a very courageous, brave, powerful hero. And at the same time, it teaches Adam important lessons about responsibility, humility, and true strength, including restraint and protecting others. Now you contrast that with the 2026 movie, and it just completely flips the whole thing on its head. The original, he was just pretending to be weak. The new movie makes him genuinely bumbling, insecure, and he has to grow into his power through sensitivity and self-doubt. That completely destroys the entire empowering message that the old cartoon used to have. The 2026 movie completely misses the point of Prince Adam and He-Man. The entire film deconstructs his masculinity instead of letting him grow into it. What's worse in the movie is that when Adam turns into He-Man, he's still Adam. He doesn't change at all. He's still the same emasculated pussy that he was before he transformed into He-Man. Only now he gets to be a pussy that can throw people across rooms and smash shit. When YouTubers tell you this movie celebrates masculinity, they're completely full of shit because it just destroys masculinity. The new movie says traditional masculine strength is the problem. You need to be sensitive, unsure, and in touch with your feelings first. They took the power fantasy that made He-Man special and they turned it into a 2-hour therapy session. When He-Man tries to rally the Warriors of Eternia to basically break out of their prison and fight back against Skeletor, he starts out like he's running an office HR meeting or something. It's absolutely cringe. And the movie, to its credit, does make a bit of a snide remark about it, but yet at the same time, they all end up going along with it like that's actually what they should be doing. And this is true with a lot of what people are saying about how it makes fun of woke. Yeah, it pokes a little bit of fun at some of the woke things, but then everybody still goes along with it like it's absolutely normal and this is the way things should be done. You just kind of make a little fun of it as you go. Every other male character in that scene is way more masculine than He-Man is. The reality is, they probably would have told him to shut the fuck up and made their own plan and just ignored his silly little ass. As I was watching this movie, I kept thinking, okay, maybe they're doing kind of a cringy hero's journey thing. And eventually, at some point in this movie, he's actually going to turn into a man and be that masculine hero that He-Man is supposed to be. But that never happens. It's not a hero's journey, it's a humiliation ritual for the entire run of the movie. I want to point out a couple of key scenes here that need to be talked about. The first being when He-Man fights Trapjaw for the first time and defeats him. He rips Trapjaw's mechanical arm off, and then he feels really bad about it. Yeah, you just defeated this dude that was trying to kill you and your friends. You rip his arm off, and then you feel bad and guilty about it. Really? Compare this to another scene later on in the movie. He-Man accidentally kills King Randor, his own dad. Yeah, it was an accident. But you know what? He-Man never feels guilty about killing his own father. He's sad that his father dies, but he never once brings up the fact that he's the one that caused the guy's death. Not once. But he makes a point in the movie to complain about feeling bad about tearing Trapjaw's arm off. He-Man and Master-at-Arms Duncan, they have this little cry together where they talk about their fee-fees and shit, right? And yet, his mom, the queen, her husband just died. She sheds one little tear while she's hugging He-Man, and that's it. He-Man feels no guilt for killing his own dad. But again, this is 2026 Hollywood, who hates men, hates father figures. The writers of this movie clearly had daddy issues. Later on in the movie, Duncan comes up to He-Man and asks how his feelings are. Not, hey man, you all good? No, it's, how are you doing with your feelings? I mean, come on. Alright, I think that's enough about complaining about how emasculated He-Man is, and even Man-at-Arms just, yeah, they did him dirty in this too. But I'm going to talk about some other similar things here. The movie makes both Adam and He-Man into a complete bumbling idiot. The slapstick, lighthearted comedy that in the old cartoon was usually given to, say, Orko, for example, that's been pushed onto He-Man and Adam in the new movie. There's a scene early on where Adam's in his car and he accidentally puts the car into reverse instead of drive, like he hasn't been driving a car for the last 9 years. In previous decades, that's the kind of joke they would have written for like a woman in a comedy. Oops, I actually put the car in reverse. Whoopsie. But no, Adam does it now. They've obviously inverted the whole, thing about women being bad drivers and whatever, and put it instead on the guy that's supposed to be the masculine hero instead. There's another scene when Adam's trying to get the sword off the barbarian statue in the comic shop or whatever it was, and people are filming him in a very awkward looking position where it almost looks like he's humping it or something. Even later, when they're on Eternia, when they're in the ship, Tila tells him to go hop on the sky sled, and they repeat the whole gag about He-Man accidentally putting it into reverse and bumping into the bulkhead of the ship behind the cockpit. And if they had just had that gag, I would have been okay with that, because, I mean, let's be real, He-Man has never driven a sky sled before, as far as we know, right? So accidentally putting that one into reverse by mistake, yeah, that makes sense. But since they did that gag previously with a normal car that he would have been driving in real life for like 9 years by this point in the movie, right? It's just another emasculating thing that they make He-Man do. So part of me wonders if the reason we didn't actually get Orko properly in this movie is because they wanted to shift the comedy bits from Orko onto He-Man instead, just to enforce how much of a bumbling idiot this masculine hero really is. There may be other moments in the film, but these are the ones that really stood out the most to me. Now let's talk about the blatant feminist messaging that's in this movie. We'll start with Tila as the girl boss supreme. So Tila is ultra competent, she's emotionally flat, she's pretty bitchy, never fails, leads the charge, and she's basically the He-Man that we would have wanted in the movie. In fact, one line by Man at Arms, he's hugging Tila, and he says that she's the man that he always wanted to be. Now, when he says that, she does make a face and go, okay, like she's confused. But again, it's part of that woke messaging where they push the message, but they try and cover it up by being a little jokey with it. When we first meet the grown up Tila, she's helping Adam escape from Beastman as he's wrecking shit. And I'm actually okay with this part because, in the context of the movie, Adam's obviously this emasculated pussy who's never fought anything in his life, and she has to come and help him out and get him to Eternia. And I didn't have really any issue with that. I've seen similar things in other forms of media before. It's not a true girl boss moment, really. It's actually kind of similar to the old cartoon where Tila was a competent fighter. She was captain of the guard. She would save the day once in a while. She wasn't a Mary Sue at all back in the cartoon because she would, make bad decisions, get herself in trouble. He-Man would have to save her, but sometimes she'd be able to save He-Man, so they kind of mix it up a little bit. And this feels very similar to that kind of thing, so I'm okay with that part. My problem with her comes later in a movie where she's just becoming a run-of-the-mill 2020s Hollywood strong female character type, where she's just a complete cunt to Man-at-Arms and He-Man, with just kind of girl bossing around wearing the shit, just being a complete bitch, and it's really annoying, and it's not like Tila at all. To the writer's credit, she didn't actually upstage He-Man in his own movie throughout the whole movie, say sort of like what I hear Kevin Smith's adaptation did. It's not a bait and switch where they basically sideline He-Man and make Tila the star of the show. It's not like that. The actress who plays Tila said in an interview that Skeletor embodies toxic masculinity. Well, toxic masculinity doesn't exist. It's just part of the whole woke feminist ideology to break down traditional gender norms. It's basically a political and social weapon designed to emasculate men. Everything we usually associate with masculinity is now bad, and men should be more feminine, and women should be more masculine. You never hear the same people talk about toxic femininity, which would be misogynist. But if toxic femininity existed, it would basically be that everything we usually consider feminine is bad and that women should be more masculine. And the reason I bring this up is because you see this in the movie with characters like Tila, Dion. They basically don't show any feminine traits. They only show what is more masculine. Whereas the big two male characters in the movie, He-Man and Man-at-Arms, show very little actual masculine traits. They are way more feminine. Dion, for example, has no character at all. She's just a complete dick. Like I said earlier, she kind of acts like your stereotypical 1980s bully that's only there just to be an asshole to people. That's her entire character. There's a scene later on in the movie where Adam makes a romantic overture toward Tila, and she completely friend zones him. And this is typical of modern Hollywood girl boss, strong female character types. Falling in love with a man is framed as a weakness that undermines her independence and competence. The strong female character must remain superior, or at least equal in a way that doesn't require emotional reliance on the male hero. You can fight alongside the guy, but you can't need him romantically. And also remembering that this is modern Hollywood, they're leaving her open to a potential lesbian relationship in any potential sequel. Of course, judging by box office numbers, the likelihood of a sequel is pretty low now. But that option is there. She could potentially have a girlfriend in the next He-Man movie. The Dion character, however you say her freaking name, she's right there. It's basically just ready and waiting if they want to go that route. And this again kind of goes against the original cartoon, where while He-Man and Tila didn't actually have a romantic relationship during the show, there was some clear romantic tension between them. Like, she respected his heroic side and he admired her strength and that kind of thing. Like, the opportunity was there if they ever wanted to do it. It's just another example of the film expressing their woke ideology at the expense of the power fantasy and natural character chemistry. One thing I always liked about the original He-Man, and it was pretty common with the cartoons of the 80s, there was a good dynamic between the male and female characters. like they usually always got along well. They complemented each other. They fought side by side. They worked well as a team. And when you were like, 4 to 8 years old at the time, I think that was great because it kind of showed you that, yeah, you can work with girls as a team together well. And that's honestly the way life works the best. Men and women have to work together as a team and complement each other, not constantly fight and bicker and be bitchy toward each other. I mentioned earlier in the video that we'd be talking about Roboto again, and this is the part where we do that. In the original show, in the toy line, Roboto was a male robot. In the movie, it's now a female robot. The setup in the movie is that Roboto is a really badass combat robot. It's explicitly pointed out that she's supposedly better than 20 normal human soldiers. But what's happened is that after Roboto supposedly accidentally tried to kill Man-at-Arms, he reprogrammed her, and now she's basically a maid. When we first see her, she's sweeping the floor of the prison that they're being kept in. And of course, your emasculated He-Man is pointing out that she should be out fighting and being a combat robot again. So the feminist messaging here is you have this woman being oppressed by a man-at-arms, into being a maid, where if she could only get free of doing domestic chores, she could be a badass combat robot and kick everybody's ass. Now, literally in the movie's context, that's true. She is actually a combat robot who could kick ass. But the messaging suggests that it's basically women are being oppressed by men into being housewives, cleaning house, etc. Where if they could just break free from that male oppression, they could be whatever they want to be and be much more valuable to the world than if they were just a simple housewife. And again, people keep trying to convince you that this movie's not woke. And my last little point about the feminist messaging in this movie is kind of a blink and you'll miss it moment, where you have the king getting needlessly killed during the movie to set up a Queen of Eternia situation. There was literally no reason for them to kill off King Randor except for one, to have a scene where He-Man gets to cry over his dead dad and try to express his feelings toward him before he dies, and then set up having a female ruler of Eternia rather than the male leader. Again, a lot of the bigger YouTube reviewers probably didn't even notice this bit. The 2026 Masters of the Universe movie shows very little respect for its source material. And this is one of the most frustrating parts of the whole movie, because some of the things they did really well, and they look really cool. As an old school He-Man fan, you can't help but get a little pumped up when you see the Sword of Power for the first time. The Trapjaw character looks absolutely fantastic. Mechanic and Ram Man, other than Ram Man being Asian, their costumes and stuff, and the same goes for Fisto, their costumes and stuff look great. They really look a lot like the old school cartoon characters brought to life. I thought Skeletor's face was really cool. The rest of his costume, maybe not so much, but I absolutely loved his staff as well. Very spot on compared to the old school stuff. Castle Grayskull looks pretty cool. Occasionally we get a glimpse of the movie that we actually wanted to see. Like at the very end where He-Man's riding Battle Cat and Battle Cat actually has his armor on. That right there is the movie we wanted to see, not the movie we got. So beyond those few little glimpses of, I guess you can almost call it fan service, there's really no other respect for the original source material. And unfortunately, it seems like those little pieces of fan service were enough to help convince some of these bigger name YouTube channels to think that this movie is, He-Man done right and not a complete bit of woke slop. The 80s cartoon and the toys, they were unapologetically about heroic fantasy, clear good versus evil, masculine and muscular heroes. You had loyal friends, exciting battles and fights, and this new version just injects modern irony, Marvel-style jokes and dialogue. Earth corporate satire, identity subplots. It's just, there's nothing there that's actually true to the spirit of the original cartoon and toy line. Remakes of things should honor the spirit of what they're remaking, but instead we get this deconstruction of beloved franchises and myths, and it's just a a continued trend in Hollywood to do this. You keep that IP brand for profit while injecting modern day politics into it. And honestly, one of the saddest and most demoralizing things about all this is reading comments on YouTube from people who said they grew up loving He-Man, who are absolutely okay and loving all this that's changed, and the complete subversion of what we all used to love as kids. And I think out of all the franchises that Hollywood has destroyed in the last 15 years or so, this one kind of hits me the hardest, because they came the closest to actually making something that would have been worth your time and money to see, and they didn't do it. They just completely destroyed it. There's a lot of argument around the he, him pronouns that are on Adam's desk at his office. People say it's making fun of the woke ideology and proof that the movie isn't woke. However, I see it more as just a woke play on the whole He-Man thing. I don't think it's mocked enough to truly be an anti-woke joke. I mean, he's openly got his pronouns on his desk, and never once in the movie does he ever, make a joke or mock pronoun usage. I mean, you can tell the guy in the movie would 100% be behind using pronouns. And likewise, his woman of color girl boss, actual boss at work, she feels like a little bit over the top, like they're kind of poking fun at some of the more extreme corporate wokeness type things. But again, our hero, Adam/He-Man, he never goes against any of this kind of stuff. In fact, when he goes to Eternia, he brings all this kind of stuff with him and implements it in Eternia. As mentioned before, the scene where he's basically turning what should be a rallying battle speech into corporate HR speak. All of the supposed anti-woke jokes are just little jibes at things, but again, never once do they ever say anything that criticizes it or push characters in a way that goes against any of this stuff. I've heard people argue that it's anti-woke because while Adam's at work on Earth, he's miserable, like they're saying that all the corporate wokeness is making him miserable. But if you look into this, that's not what they're saying at all. He's not miserable because of corporate wokeness. He's miserable because he's trapped in an office when he wants to be out there looking for his sword so he can go back to Eternia. His boss even tells him in the movie that he does a great job, that he's likable and everything, and just basically you're told that he goes along with everything, like he's fits right in with all their woke policies. He never goes against it. He doesn't get fired because he rejects the corporate DEI woke bullshit. He gets fired because he'd rather go out and get his sword and his ticket home than sit in that office and work. His troubles fitting into Earth society are all down to him basically being an alien from another planet and not quite fitting in, rather than him being more like a, I don't know, conservative or right wing or whatever, just someone who rejects all the woke crap. His boss makes some comments about consent, I think maybe even more than once in the same scene, and people could argue that that's poking fun of the whole you need to ask for consent for everything thing. But even that gets subverted by later on in the movie, where He-Man meets up with Cringer again, and Cringer asks for consent to lick Adam. And Adam doesn't play it off like it's supposed to be some kind of joke. And if it was supposed to be a joke, why is Cringer, who's never been to Earth or exposed to any of this consent stuff, asking for consent to give him a lick like any normal dog or cat would do to somebody, right? So yet again, when people say it's not woke, it's anti-woke, I don't know if they're just lying or if they can't see past the movie jangling keys in front of their face to not notice the blatant wokeness in the movie. I've seen a lot of comments on YouTube from people who are saying that the original cartoon was campy, and I very strongly disagree with that statement. The original was not intended to be campy. It was a sincere, straightforward, heroic adventure aimed at children. It had clear good versus evil storytelling, moral lessons, and it was an earnest power fantasy. It was a wholesome kids cartoon that at the end of every episode they even had a kind of cheesy moral lesson to teach kids. Adam's transformation into He-Man was meant to be empowering and exciting. His secret identity added drama and relatability to it. It wasn't a metaphor for being gay and coming out of the closet. The perception that the cartoon was campy is something that didn't come around until decades after the cartoon series actually ended. It's easy now, from a corrupted 2026 point of view, to look back at that show and see a bunch of muscle-bound dudes in their underwear wrestling each other and think, man, that's really homoerotic. But if you were a kid between 4 and 8 at the time, you just took it at face value for a cool action adventure. And that's the way it was originally intended. It was not supposed to be some campy homoerotic adventure series. A lot of its false reputation for being campy comes from the memes and internet nostalgia. Like, we've all seen the memes online, the 4 non-blondes, what's going on meme, etc. I've heard talk that He-Man has become a gay icon, and that's interesting enough on its own, because you've made a gay icon out of a children's cartoon character who wasn't even gay. The fact that you're making a gay icon out of a children's cartoon character in itself is very, very questionable. In comparison, the 2026 film is campy and does include homoeroticism in it, particularly from Skeletor himself, who makes a comment to He-Man about that long sword dangling between his glorious thighs. That makes me think Skeletor's a bit sexually confused in the movie, because early on in the movie he's talking to Evelyn, and he's worried about her leaving him. Now, you could look at that phrase, leaving him, as he could just mean he's worried that an ally is leaving him, but usually when you talk about people leaving you, it means a romantic partner leaving you. So if he's worried about Evelyn as a romantic partner leaving him, but also making comments about He-Man's schlong and his glorious thighs, yeah, this leans way more into degenerate Hollywood territory. So I guess now we should talk a little bit more about Skeletor then. The most obvious place to start would be Jared Leto as Skeletor, replacing the great Alan Oppenheimer, who voiced Skeletor in the original. Despite the huge difference between the two character types, I actually didn't really have an issue overall with how Jared Leto portrayed Skeletor. It was more in how he was written than anything else. Visually, Skeletor looked good, and I thought the voice work was actually pretty decent. Of course, if you were expecting Skeletor in the movie to be anything like the original cartoon, you're going to be vastly disappointed, because they're nothing the same. Directly comparing the two Skeletors, I feel like the movie has absolutely just destroyed the character of Skeletor. While the original Skeletor had his funny and comedic moments, the humor with this Skeletor feels very out of place when it's used compared to how he is all the rest of the times. For instance, you may have seen the clip online where they basically take the Dr. Evil gag from Austin Powers, where he's sitting there doing his evil laugh and none of his henchmen are reacting to him, and he has to kind of point it out to them. It's slightly amusing, but at the same time, it doesn't really fit the feel of the character or the movie at all. He doesn't really make a ton of jokes in the film. I think there's only 2 I really remember, and both of them don't really work. I really feel like this new Jared Leto Skeletor could have been a pretty good Skeletor had they cut that particular type of comedy out, and had they not been influenced by these modern internet memes and queer coded them. In a few reviews for the movie that I saw, people talk about how good the music was. I think they have Brian May from Queen playing guitar or something in there. But to me, the music was very forgettable. Like, you know, when a movie has a really good score and you come out of the theater and the theme is stuck in your head, you can think of a number of really great theme songs, music scores, Star Wars, Jurassic Park, that kind of thing. It just sticks in your head after you've been there. But this, I can't even remember how the music went. It was so forgettable. There were only 2 parts of the movie where I can even remember the music that's being played. And unfortunately, they're both for the wrong reasons. You've probably heard other reviewers talk about they play Queen's Princes of the Universe during one section. And I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. It feels more like a Highlander thing. But they end up ruining the moment with a gag anyway, so any kind of meaningful moment just falls completely on its face. And then the second time is near the end of the movie when they actually play the old original theme song, or at least a new cinematic version of it, right? Now, I imagine they put that in there to kind of stir up all the old OG fans, get them all nostalgic and bring a tear to their eye or make their hearts soar, right? But to me, after watching them shit on He-Man for 2.5 hours, it almost had the opposite effect. I'm like, oh, get the fuck out of here with that bullshit. I don't even want you going anywhere near our old theme song. That was kind of the feeling I had. Like, it just had the opposite effect, man. It wasn't nostalgia. It was like, really, just get away from anything related to the old series that I love. Just get the fuck out. I need to correct myself here for a minute. I said there were 2 moments in the movie where I remember the music. There's actually 3 now that I think about it. In the scene I mentioned earlier, where they're on Earth and Beastman shows up to try and take the sword away from Adam. When all this starts happening, they start playing the Four Non-Blondes, What's Going On, meme music. And again, it's kind of like, just roll your eyes. It's like, I see you're going for that modern audience again, the ones that only know this franchise from the memes. So after analyzing the movie, let's talk about whether or not the film was actually fun to watch and who in particular might actually enjoy seeing it. For me personally, this is one of the most frustrating movies I've ever seen because parts of it were truly kind of fun to watch. But those particular moments were very few and far between. The rest of the movie, I'm sitting there either rolling my eyes with cringe or just getting mad that they're shitting on the franchise I used to love as a kid so badly. If you were between 4 and 7 years old in 1983 when the cartoon came out and you had the toys and you had a really strong connection to the cartoon and the toys as well, then you're probably going to be disappointed with this movie and not like it very much. It's too much of a departure from what you loved. It shows very little respect for it, and it's replaced everything that you loved about the original show with modern millennial Marvel type humor and identity politics. When they do show you glimpses of the movie you actually wanted to see, it almost feels like they're rubbing it in your face that that's not what they actually gave you. So who would actually like this movie? Well, I think if you were a few years older than that 4 to 7 demographic I was talking about, and you just kind of happened to casually watch it once in a while, maybe you kind of liked it, but you just weren't as emotionally attached to it as the younger ones were, like me. Say you were 10 when the cartoon came out, and you don't care about politics and movies, and you don't care if stories and characters get changed, and you don't care if it's 100% accurate to what you originally saw, then yeah, you probably like this movie. When other reviewers said it was a fun movie, I can see where they're coming from, but it wasn't, for a person like me, it wasn't as fun as it could have been. It's also kind of the same if you were a little bit younger than that 4 to 7 demographic. Say you weren't even born until 1985 or 1986, and the cartoons had already kind of gone through their initial run, and by the time you were old enough to remember everything, it was already, closer to 1990 than 1983, for example. Then I feel like if you'd seen them in reruns, etc., then maybe, yeah, you might also enjoy this. Because again, you don't have the same emotional attachment as the kids my age did. When we saw everything as it was happening, we got the toys as they came out. We were there with our own peer groups and that whole general zeitgeist of the time, so to speak. Then yeah, you might also enjoy the movie. But what if you had never seen the originals? What if you didn't really even know anything about He-Man? What if all you knew about He-Man was just from the internet memes of the last 10 years or so? Well, you might actually enjoy this movie because it's basically a self-parody of He-Man based on a lot of the memes. The memes even show up in the movie sometimes. Is knowing He-Man only by the memes enough to get you to buy a ticket to the movie? Well, I'm not exactly convinced about that. Likewise, I'm not very sure how much kids who don't know He-Man at all would actually be interested in seeing this. I suppose if the kid enjoyed Marvel movies, maybe they'd enjoy this too. I do feel like you really need to have at least some prior knowledge of the He-Man universe to really get the most out of the movie, though. I can only really speculate on why the box office numbers aren't very good. If I had to give you a theory, I'd say it was mostly the people I mentioned earlier who weren't super attached to He-Man, but maybe they did enjoy the show before they're going to see it, and they don't really care too much about woke politics in movies. They just want to go and, sit down, turn the brains off, and watch something. Those might be the people who are propping up the numbers. Because I feel like the really diehard fans, or people like me who were very attached to the show back when they were kids, they've seen how this is not their He-Man, and they probably have not gone out to the theaters as much as some of the other people. And at the same time, today's kids who don't know He-Man either at all, or they only know him from seeing some random Skeletor or He-Man memes once in a while, I don't think that they'd be flooding the theaters to see this. I'm sure there's lots of other reasons involved with this as well. One thing could be superhero fatigue. I mean, He-Man's not exactly the same as like a Marvel superhero movie, but it's similar. People might just be tired of this crap. People might be tired of the way Hollywood has treated, old franchises like this and Star Wars, etc. So that may have kept a lot of people away. It's probably going to do better on streaming, where people don't have to directly fork out money just to see it. The only reason I even saw it is because I got to see it for free. I was not going to pay money to see this based on all the red flags I'd seen from trailers and interviews. So would I recommend people see this movie? Well, if you're a He-Man fan, I would say no. If you just want to go see a shut your brain off movie and don't care about anything else, just, yeah, you might as well, man. But mostly I'd say wait for it to come out on streaming so you're not actually forking out all that money to see this. Because honestly, I don't think it's worth paying money to see. And with that, I think I'm going to wrap this video up. There's probably a lot of other points that I've forgot to bring up that I'll be kicking myself for not mentioning later. But for now, that's going to be it. Thank you for watching. Feel free to hate me in the comments all you want. I'll leave comments open. Anybody's welcome to kind of comment and discuss. Thanks again for watching.